All right, we got to hear from Dan Campbell at the Scouting Combine. We heard from Brad Holmes too, but in this video, we're just going to talk about what Dan Campbell talked about. If you watched it, if you saw it, or even if you didn't see it, what is the one thing you want to hear? What is the one thing you are the most concerned about or the most excited about? And Dan Campbell spent pretty much the entirety of his 17 plus minutes talking about the coaching staff and talking about changes in the coaching staff. And there's a couple things that I absolutely want to hear. I want you to be able to hear that he talked about. So I'm going to play those throughout this video. But first, I want to hear what you have to say as well. Write down a comment below. What is the biggest change that you love in this coaching staff? We like to keep it positive here. So let's hear about it. And what is this look like? And Dan Campbell talked about building a staff. And in this video, we're going to talk about why that's important. We're going to talk about how he got it right. But then we're going to even go over to the defensive side. So first, I want to talk about how you put together a staff. I'm going to let it come from Dan Campbell himself. Then we're going to chat about it for a little bit. And then I got another quote for you later. Here it is.
Same thing when they were leaving, and it was the same thing I was told. The most important thing you'll do as a head coach is hiring your staff. And so I had to do that already one time, and then over the course of, the last 4 years, other coaches that have come and gone. And so this was the biggest, this is kind of the phase two, man. This was to reload the coordinators and different position coaches. So I wanted to take my time and do it right. And so, I had a lot of interviews, and really sat them down, got to know them, kind of figured them out a little bit, what they take. The football is there, but it's really about the mesh, the chemistry. I'm big on that. So that was a big part of it, and I think we got it right.
All right, I love at the end there. He goes, I think we got it right. And he does like this little sly smile of like, yeah, it was good staff. I know it was a good staff. You guys don't even need to worry about this. I put together the right staff. But in that, he talked about chemistry. He talked about mesh. Do they work well with each other? He talked more about how you need to have coaches that are just like players. Like, do they fit with this team? Do they belong with us? I believe is the term that he used. And he talked about your starting level coaches, obviously your coordinators, your position coaches, and then he talked about your backups. He talked about the secondary guys, and I think they ended up hiring 24, 26. I mean, like there was a ton of change. At least they were talking about that. And so just a ton of stuff, but he said this is phase two. And I don't know about you, but usually when I do something the second or third time, I get better. I learn from my mistakes, and Dan Campbell has been a person that has proven as a coach that he learns from his mistakes, that the team continues to get better. So I love hearing this. But yes, he spent time talking about the offensive side of the ball, and that's really good. But he also spent time talking about his new defensive coordinator, Kevin Shepard. And when we talk about Shep, me and Chris came on here, the guy who I do this channel with. If you're new to this channel, we love talking Detroit Lions. We want to give a fresh, positive spin on a lot of the things that are going on with the Lions, and we try and be as non-biased as possible, and we try and say it for what it is. And I will admit, when Shep was hired, both of us, I think, were a little like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And what our hope was he could be someone that could be maybe a more humble Aaron Glenn. Someone that wouldn't be so stuck to his ways. And what we both kind of talked about is how Aaron Glenn sees everything from a cornerback point of view. He sees everything from a defensive back or back end point of view. And the hope is that Shepard can come in as a player, as a linebacker, as a player, and then being a linebacker's coach, hopefully he can see it from more of an all-encompassing view of the defense and therefore be more multiple in the way you play defense. Not just, all right, so our defensive backs are going to do this, and this is what the offense or the defense has to do in response to it. But instead, like, all right, maybe these guys will do this up front. Linebackers will fade into this way, and then the defense will do, or the back end will do this thing. And Dan Campbell actually talked about it as well. So I want to make sure I want to play this clip for you as well, just to hear about the difference between Shep and AG.
Just in general, when you think about, I think, AG, I think, had a lot of perspective from the back end forward. And that's how
Back
a lot
end
of those
forward.
guys think, man. Everything, most of it does start with the coverage, and then how does it tie into the front? Because that's how it gets altered. You can't just put a front up there, and then if the coverage isn't right, it's easier to adjust the front to the coverage than vice versa. So whereas Shep's kind of got a little bit of both, man. He's that front seven, and then, the back end doesn't mean it comes last. It's just, I think there's a little bit more thought up front and inside than there is back there. And that's where Deshae and them are going to be great for him and help him out. And so it's just a little different perspective. And there'll be some things that we'll tweak that.
All right. It's a different perspective. That means that it's not going to be the same defense. Yeah, they're still going to run man. He talked about that, but he said, what kind of man are we going to run? They can change things up. It doesn't have to be the same. I think a lot of people, Aaron Glenn did better this year when he had more talent. I think this defense has more talent than we give it credit for. And Aaron Glenn, what we would always say is he's either going to go into a game and the game plan is going to be the game plan. And if it's going well, it's going well. And if it's not going well, look out. We might be screwed in this one. And that is exactly what happened in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs against the Washington Commanders. We had a system that we played, and it was the same exact thing that we did against the Minnesota Vikings 2 weeks prior in the final season, or in the final game of the regular season, and it didn't work against Jaden Daniels because Jaden Daniels was so much better. Now, I understand there was a lot of injuries. I understand all that kind of stuff. I understand what Aaron Glenn did with all the injuries was pretty remarkable throughout the year. But also the ability to shift and to tweak and to change. If you have a more holistic approach to your defense, it is easier to change and interchange moving parts. It's a lot easier to do it and change on the fly. Whereas I think with Aaron Glenn, it's like, nope, this is how I play defense. This is what we're going to do. I know I've talked about it on this channel. It was like Don Brown at U of M. If you have Michigan fans here, you know what I'm talking about. Even Michigan State fans, you probably know. Don Brown was the defensive coordinator under Harbaugh for 4 or 5 years. And in the Don Brown defense, it was blitz heavy, man-to-man, and it worked really, really well, except against Ohio State and whoever we'd play in the bowl game. It just didn't work. And then when we started to bring in defenses from guys that were a little more multiple at U of M, all of a sudden our defense became the top of the nation. And the first defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, is now the head coach with the Seattle Seahawks. He went and became the DC at Baltimore, now head coach at Seattle. And then the next guy in that lineup ended up going to be the defensive coordinator for Harbaugh at the Chargers. And both of them, guess what their position coach was in the NFL for the Ravens? Linebackers. And I think linebacker, everybody always says middle linebacker is like the quarterback of the defense. And we see so many former quarterbacks. In fact, we've hired multiple of them onto this staff, right? I think we've got Gradkowski. I think we got Tuiasosopo. We got Mark Brunell. Like Ben Johnson was a former quarterback, and I know he's not our OC anymore. Don't get me wrong. All right, I know it's John Morton, but we talk about the middle linebacker being the quarterback of the defense. It's an I because you have to know what's going on behind you and in front of you and what you're doing. Whereas other people, it's just like, all right, I got to do my job, right? And so I think it gives a different view to the defense. I'm really excited to see a defense that's not so cut and paste. Not so cut and paste. And it is a change that we desperately needed. All right, thanks for watching. We got more. These interviews were great. We'll see you on the next one.
And the system that we